So who remembers what we talked about last week? Does anyone? Saris was not here. You're off the hook. What's that? The harvest. Yes, it is harvest time. Yeah, if you didn't know the answer, the banner's on the side of the building. We talked about the harvest. Yeah, and we talked about how God is the Lord of the harvest, how he's the one that everything that we have, every blessing that we have comes from God. And it's a harvest. So your job, your home, your family, that's a harvest of what God has blessed you with, what he's given to you. And we sort of bridged the gap. We looked at Matthew chapter 9, verses 35 and through 38, and we kind of hung on that part where Jesus says, ask the Lord of the harvest to bring workers into the field. And we sort of started at the end. And this week, we're gonna go back to the beginning of it because it's really important and it's really cool what Jesus says. So I just want to read these verses again, verses 35 through 38. It says, Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness. And when he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest. And so today we're going to talk about this idea. The harvest is plentiful, the workers are few. And if there's any confusion, let me make it clear that people are the harvest and we are the workers, okay? This is what Jesus is getting at. And we're actually, so that's sort of our reference, but we're going to actually, if you have your Bibles, I want you to turn with me to Luke chapter 4, because this is where we're going to camp out today. And it's one of my favorite chapters in my favorite book, because it's Jesus coming in contact with a group, an individual and a group of people that he should have avoided. So if you're unfamiliar with the Samaritans and the region of Judea in that time called Samaria, they were basically half-breeds. They were the offspring of Jews that kind of hung around when all the smart, powerful people were exiled to Babylon, so to speak. That they intentionally left, the poor and the uneducated people there because they wouldn't be worried about an uprising. And so those people intermingled with people from other places that Babylon actually sent into Judea. They did a lot of mixing and matching, and it was all part of sort of destabilizing these places that they took over and asserting their dominance. And the Babylonians did it, the Assyrians did it, the Babylonians did it, the Persians did it, the Greeks did it. Kind of everybody did it. It was their way of just, making everybody the same. And so the Samaritans are the offspring, the descendants of the Jews that stayed around, that intermingled with the people that came in. And so the Jews that came back with Ezra and Nehemiah and those guys that rebuilt the walls, that rebuilt the temple, they looked down on these people because they were half-breeds. They were undesirable. They weren't allowed to come to Jerusalem to worship. They had different beliefs. They had their own version of the law that they followed, that they believed. And so they just didn't associate. That's why when we read the story of the Good Samaritan, like Good Samaritan isn't just a name of like, nowadays people who aren't even Christians, he's a good Samaritan. Samaritan's purse. It just means a good person doing a good thing. Actually, what that story is about a man who has mercy and shows love to a person that's supposed to be his enemy. The Jews looked down on the Samaritans. They were less than. And so Jesus is traveling through Samaria. He's teaching. His disciples are baptizing in Samaria. And he comes to this town, and he's at the well of this town, and a woman comes out. And we've all heard this story where the woman comes out, and Jesus says, hey, can you give me some water? And she's like, oh, okay. Do you have? I'm a Samaritan, though. Like, how can you ask me for water? You're Jewish. This is against the rules. And he goes on to tell her who he is, what he's about, This is where we get the term living water, because he tells her that he's got living water, and if she would drink that, then she would never be thirsty again. And she says, well, give me some of this. I don't have to come out to the well anymore. And he says, go and get your husband. Because he knows. And she's like, I don't have a husband. He's like, no, you don't have a husband. You've had 5 husbands. And the dude you're with right now isn't your husband. So he pulls out all her dirty laundry and he hangs it up in front of her. Not to make her feel bad, not to make her feel like, yeah, Samaritan, that's what you are. No, he does this because now she knows, this is a prophet. Who is this man? And he goes on to tell her that I am the Messiah. I am the one that's going to save you. And it's this awesome moment of Jesus meeting with this person that he shouldn't be meeting with and telling her truth. And she goes back into her town and she tells everybody, I think I found the Messiah. I'm pretty sure I found him, guys. We need to go check this out. And they all come, and then the disciples show up. And in typical disciple fashion, they just pour water on the fire. They're like, oh. And they show up, and the people are coming to see Jesus, and all the disciples can focus on is lunch. Like, they completely miss what's about to happen here. And I want to read this because this is really, really important. It's a really good learning experience and learning moment for us. So if you're in John chapter 4, we're in verse 27. Just then his disciples returned. They were surprised to find him talking with a woman. But no one asked, what do you want, or why are you talking with her? So it'd be odd for just an unmarried man and an unmarried woman to be sitting talking by themselves. That's what this is. Then leaving her water jar, the woman went back to the town, said to the people, come, see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Christ? For a second, real quick, how many of you, if someone walks up to you and just tells you all the bad stuff you've ever done, are you going to be excited about this guy? Are you going to be like, oh my gosh, I need to go tell everybody. He can tell you all your crap. No, you're going to be, you jerk. No, so she goes, I just think it's awesome. And so she says, come see, a man has told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Christ? And they came out of the town. They made their way to him. Meanwhile, his disciples urged him, Rabbi, eat something. And, Jesus, we hear, like, he probably hadn't eaten in a while. They were probably concerned about their friend. Dude, you gotta eat lunch. Come on, you're gonna be tired. And he said, because he's Jesus, I have food to eat that you know nothing about. And the disciples, being the disciples, don't get it. And they said to each other, could someone have brought him some food? They don't get it. And he says, my food is to do the will of him who sent me and to finish his work. Like, just the fact that the thing that gives Jesus strength and energy, the thing he feeds on, is to do the job that God sent him to do. I mean, that's a sermon right there in and of itself. I could stop there if I wanted to. How many of us, the thing that gives me my drive and my energy and the will to go on every day is to do the work that God has sent me to do? That's a tall order, because I need food. And then he says this. I love it. He says, do you not say 4 months more, then the harvest? I tell you, open your eyes and look at the fields. They are ripe for harvest. Even now the reaper draws his wages. Even now he harvests the crop for eternal life, so that the sower and the reaper may be glad together. Thus the saying, one sows and another reaps, is true. I sent you to reap what you have not worked for. Others have done the hard work. You have reaped the benefits of your labor. So again, Jesus is using the idea of the harvest. And he says, you want me to eat? Let's talk about food for a second. Let's talk about the harvest. You say in 4 months more, and then the harvest. Like we have some time. We can wait. The harvest, it's not ready yet. So he says, I tell you, open your eyes and look at the fields. They are ripe for harvest. What? Like let's dig into this, no pun intended. Let's dig into this for a second. The harvest, this idea, not the small harvest that God gives us in our life that we talked about, but the harvest, capital T, the harvest. If we are the church and we are the followers and the disciples of Christ, then this instruction is for us. And I don't think they harvested everybody 2,000 years ago and now the harvest isn't there anymore. Because harvest is cyclical, right? It repeats. Every year we harvest. The harvest is full. That's the people, he says, they are ripe for the harvest. So the idea that the fields are ripe for harvest, I want to look at that. I want to look at where we are right now today as a world, as a nation, and as the church, and look at the idea of the fields being ripe for harvest. And if something is ripe, I'm learning this as the farming things continue, as Bailey learns more at her job on the farm. In order to harvest, the conditions need to be right. And they don't need to be right just in that moment of harvest. They need to be right the entire season leading up to the harvest. And a lot of work needs to get put in to make those conditions right for the harvest. And I think I mentioned this last week, that we learned that soil's not really good until about year 2 of working it and fertilizing it. Like, it is a process. The first thing that you have to do if you're going to get ready for a harvest, if things are going to happen, and the fields need to be plowed. Can't plant anything if the fields aren't plowed. You're just scattering seed on grass or untilled earth. So the actual physical process, the requirements for seeds to grow, there needs to be aeration in the soil. That's why we plow. If it's too dense, then the water's just going to sit in there and it'll oversaturate the seed and the seed will rot. Or air can't get through because the air needs seeds. Worms can't get through there to break things up and enrich the soil. The fields need to be plowed. So it breaks up rocky soil and organic matter that's left in the soil. And it's obviously Jesus is not talking about actual farming. So what is it? It's, to me, as I look at it, it's the breaking up of the established order. So we here, let's put it in our time. We in this country have now come out of what I don't know what other people call it. I call it the golden age of American Christianity. Right? From like probably the early 1900s. If you're a history buff, you can correct me, but probably from like the early 1900s to mid 1960s. That was like the height, the peak. Like before 1900s, things were bleak. We think that this has always been a very Christian nation, but the 1800s were like brutal. People were just killing each other left and right. I mean, it was bad. And then things started to kind of shape up, and world wars will kind of do that to you, and you see evil in the rest of the world, and things, we have titans like Billy Graham going around, and so it starts to come to this Christian place where now a lot of people, if kind of my age and older, think of America as we were this Christian nation because we lived in that time for a period, or we lived in the aftermath of that time. And I think for most people, there's still a lot of people in the church holding on, but for most people, they don't consider America a Christian nation anymore. We've still got Christian verbiage in our government things. In God we trust is still on our money. They haven't taken that away. We still talk about the Constitution, or the Declaration of Independence still has the inalienable rights that the Creator endowed on us. This language is still there. It's still there, but the living out of it in our nation, I don't think we're a Christian nation anymore. I don't think we have been for a long time. I think it was probably the 60s that started it, with more free thinking and sexual revolution and all of these things. We took further and further steps away from God, away from a moral compass that's defined by our Scripture. But I think there's some reasons that it got there, and I think there's a lot of reasons that it's amped up over the last 15 years, because the last 15 years have really, like, carried it into what is now commonly referred to as a post-Christian world. People that I grew up with, that went to youth group with me, that were worship leaders in youth group and small group leaders in youth group, are now atheists. And I sit there and I wonder why. Why did this? Why did I stay a Christian and you didn't? Part of that's because I went to a Christian school for ministry, so it's easier. But a lot of them, they went out into the world for the first time, and they got different ideas and different viewpoints. And a lot of them, maybe their faith wasn't really their faith to begin with. It was something that their parents gave them, or they felt the pressure to fit in, or whatever it was. But I think the church in America, in a lot of ways, and the church in the West, in a lot of ways, has failed because it came into a religious practice or a religious observance. And really, this has been starting since the Roman Empire made Christianity its official religion. It's been starting for a long time, and there's been revivals along the way, and we've had revivals in this country, and it's helped get us back. But when you go to church out of obligation, or you go to church to be in, and we talked about this in our Church Defined series, to be part of the social group or just to check the boxes, when it becomes religion, then that soil gets bound up. It gets hard. It gets rocky. Because instead of walking in a relationship with your Creator, instead of being excited about what God's doing, you go through the motions. And we have all been a part of this. I have been a part of this. If you have been a Christian for any number of years, you've gone through the motions at some point, because it's human. It's normal, it's human, it's probably inevitable for all of us. The question is, do we stay there? I spent 2 years living in Georgia, and listen, I love the South. I really do. I love the South. It is full of great people. I lived in a town called Macon, and Macon, the Bible Belt is the South is the Bible Belt. Macon is affectionately referred to as the buckle of the Bible Belt. Because in Macon, there are more churches per capita than any other city. I think it's something like there's a church for every 250 people in Macon, Georgia. And a lot of that's because there were originally 5 churches, and they just split and split and split and split. The church I worked at, I think, split 3 times in 50 years. That's a lot. That's a lot of arguments over things that are not in here. That's human arguments. That's religion arguments. And we get caught up in that. And there was a lot of people living in the South, and I pick on the South just because it still is a Christian place in a lot of ways, that they're just going through the church motions. It was really cool at first. The first time I went to Target when I lived in Georgia, the lady at the cash register's talking to me, and everybody's really polite and kind, and I love that. And then she says, "What church do you go to?" I'm checking out at the Target, and the cashier asked me what church I go to. I'm like, that's amazing. That's awesome. That's really special. But after a while, after everybody, it's not like, at least in my experience, it wasn't like, "Hey, do you go to a church? If not, come to my church. Let me tell you about Jesus." It's like this, "Oh, what church do you go to?" It's almost like, can I get some gossip going in my own head about their church? It's this weird thing. I think there's a lot of people, and again, I pick on the South because it's easy, but there's a lot of people everywhere. I grew up in a very Catholic town. And this is a very Catholic area. And for me growing up, I kid you not, most of my friends were Catholic, and they went to religion class every Saturday until their confirmation. And to them, confirmation, and maybe this is just their church. I can't speak for the whole Catholic Church. Maybe it was just their church. Confirmation meant I don't have to go to church anymore. Annalee's nodding. Okay. That's religion. That's not faith. And that's not all Catholics. I know a lot of Catholics that are very, very honest and true and real in their faith and their walk with Jesus Christ. But we get into religion. We get caught up in it. And I think when we get caught up in religion, then our soil, the soil of our heart and our soul, gets hard. If I'm just coming to church because I'm supposed to go to church, and I'm not having any true, authentic worship, if I'm not in the Word on my own, if I'm not praying on my own, but it's just when I'm at the institute, then that's religion. We go through the motions. But I think that's starting to break away in our country. I think you have less and less people that are going through the religious motions. And in a lot of ways, I think that's not a good thing, because instead they're just going through their own motions, and they're walking into their own. It used to be you're religious. Like, I've been called religious a lot of times in my life, and I'm sure a lot of you have. Now it's like, oh, I'm spiritual. You know, how many people are spiritual? Well, yeah, you are spiritual because you got a spirit. So good job figuring that one out. But that's what they're, and so they kind of mix and match different aspects of different religions or spiritual movements that fit them and make them feel good. So the religion is kind of going away, and now it's just kind of I'm gonna take care of myself. I'm gonna figure it out on my own. James 1:27 says this. It says, "Religion that our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress, to keep oneself from being polluted by the world." And I think it's very interesting that James says, religion that our Father accepts. I think he is very intentional about using that word, because throughout James, he's talking about faith and he's talking about works. And you show me your faith, I'll show you my faith by the things I'm doing. James was all about this, and he's Jesus' brother, so I'm not going to argue with the guy. But I think he doesn't say faith that our Father accepts is this. He says religion that our Father accepts as pure and faultless because it's doing work. Religion is doing things. We can be religious. I'm not saying as Christians we shouldn't be religious. We should be religious. Religion is not a bad thing. But when it's only religion, that's where we mess up. And you've got people now that maybe they don't say they're religious, but they've got their religion. Whether their religion is money, whether their religion is social media, whether their religion is sports. Listen, I grew up going to Bills games. I had season tickets. There are a lot of people in my town and in other major cities that religion is their sport. That's what they get up on Sunday morning for. And in a lot of ways, look, I'll tell you, we would tailgate, and I'd get there at 9 in the morning. I didn't go to church on those Sundays. I was at the stadium. And I was with brothers and sisters, and there was communion, and you're hugging strangers and kissing strangers when you score. Like, it is a religious experience. There is faith there, especially if you're a Bills fan. Now it's easy because we're winning, but it's the doing of things that make religion. That's not faith. And that's why I think James says that. He says, look, you want to have religion, then go do things that take care of people, but don't hang your hat on your religion. And now we've got churches that are hanging their hat on the good things that they do. There's churches in our community that do really good, incredible things for people. But a lot of those churches don't preach the gospel. A lot of those churches, well, as long as I'm doing good things for people, as long as then they're not saving souls. They're meeting material needs, but they're not going beyond that. So you've got an entire generation, especially young people, millennials. It's really starting Gen X, millennials, whatever's after millennials, I don't even know. Gen Z, okay. X, Y, and Z, whatever letters are, different alphabets in different languages, whatever alphabet you want. They're finding their own path and their own religion. And so I think the rocky, hard soil of the religious establishment in our country has been broken up. And I think that's a good thing in a lot of ways. But it leads to a lot of people that are going down their own creation, their own path, living their own life. And so the result of that is the next condition that is ideal. So the soil, the rocky soil has been plowed. A lot of this, the people that their faith is just their parents or whatever construct they're a part of is broken up. They go and find their own way, but then there's darkness. The world is dark. Anybody in this room think everything's going great right now? It's not. It seems like every day you turn on the news, if you're brave enough to turn on the news every day, and something's going wrong. Something bad is happening every day. The world is dark. Okay, so step away from the news. Don't turn on the news. Just look at the people you know, the people that you care about. There's a lot of darkness out there because people are going their own way. They're finding their own way. They're figuring out that well, I can do it how I want to do it, so I'm happy. If it makes you happy, do it. Staggering statistic that I read yesterday. 70%, this is going to blow your mind, 70% of born-again Christians, people that label themselves born-again Christians, believe that Jesus is not the only way to God. That is mind-blowing. Because if you call yourself a born-again Christian, you assume that you're reading the Bible, and if you're reading the Bible, then you follow Jesus, and if you follow Jesus, and you say that, then you're saying Jesus is a liar because Jesus says he's the only way. So we've got even Christians that are saying, find what suits you. Find what helps you, and you can still find God. And so that brings a lot of darkness because it brings a lot of people trying to make their own way. And usually what happens is you find out that your way doesn't work. And so we've got unprecedented numbers of people suffering with addictions, unprecedented numbers of people that are in abusive relationships, people that are depressed or suicidal. I mean, it's mind-blowing if you look into where things have gotten. And it's gotten there because people are trying to find their own way, and they realize that their own way doesn't work. And so they let their human tendencies take over. And that turns into either self-destructive behavior or behavior that's going to destroy someone else because of our broken, flawed human nature. The world is dark. We live in a world that I think wants to not be dark. I don't think people want to be bad. But I think when they're trying to find it their own way, it doesn't work. When you try, right now social justice is the big thing. And justice is right. Justice is from God. But when we try, and I've said this before, when we try to administer justice without the judge, then it's not going to be justice because it's by our terms. So it's going to fail every time. Justice needs to come based on what Jesus says is justice. Justice is what James says. Take care of the widow. Take care of the orphan. Give value to human beings. But if we do that because of a political reason, then we fail. We have to do it because we see the image of God in every other person. But again, I think the darkness of the world benefits us in some way. Do you know that most seeds actually need dark to germinate? They won't actually start to grow unless it's dark. That's why we bury them in the soil. There's some seeds that actually do better with light, but most seeds, because the light will actually release gases in the seeds and break the seeds down, and it won't allow them to germinate. So most seeds need to be buried in the darkness in order to start to grow. And I think that's in an odd, twisted, backwards way, I think that's true of our world. I know for me, the moments in my life that have been the most pivotal, the most altering in my course have been the moments where I have said, God, I am at the bottom of my own capacity. I have nothing left. I need you to take over. The biggest moments of change and movement that God has done in my life have been when I've been at my darkest and my lowest. Sadly, that's us. That's people. We have to get there sometimes because we don't learn anything from other people or from past mistakes. But the darkness can benefit us when it comes to the harvest. Because if everything's going great, then I don't need anybody. If everything's working, what do I need Jesus for? I don't, because all good. So I think that darkness actually helps us because it brings people closer to that point of needing God. Man, the world's been trying to save itself for a long time, and it's not been doing good. The third condition that I think we need for the harvest is irrigation. The crops need to be watered, and they are being watered. You know, Jesus says, take courage, I have overcome the world. Take heart, I have overcome the world. And it can be so easy to see the darkness. It can be so easy to see the breakup of kind of church life in our country and think we're headed down, we're headed towards the pit, we're in a post-Christian world, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse and worse. But I don't think that's the whole story. Psalm 72:6 says this. This is Solomon. They're not sure. It's a psalm of Solomon. So either it was written by Solomon or written for Solomon. And it's talking about the Davidic, promised Davidic king, this promised king that's going to rule Israel. And he says this. He says, he will be like rain falling on a mown field, like showers watering the earth. Jesus does not stop doing what he does because we are finding our own way. So you're seeing more and more, if you're paying attention, more and more celebrities, more and more people that you know. Like, there's plenty of celebrities going down a dark, dark path. There's plenty of church leaders going down a dark, dark path. But you see these little glimpses of hope. You know, Mark Wahlberg gives testimonies in interviews about his faith in God. Denzel Washington does the same thing. Matthew McConaughey, some of the biggest stars in Hollywood are doing this. Musicians are starting to give testimony. Maybe they were always Christians, they just kind of hid it, but they're starting to come out, and as the world gets worse and worse, there's more and more people. I remember one time I didn't watch American Idol, but I was watching it somewhere with somebody, and the contestant, it was like after the final, like, you know, they're terrible and they humiliate you. You know, this is like on the big stage with the band and everything, and this person sang a worship song. I don't remember the song. I don't remember what it was. Standing ovation. The entire crowd, probably 10,000 people in this auditorium, standing, clapping, applauding. That's all those people, plus the millions of people that watched that show that just got exposed to the gospel through that song. So God doesn't, he's not deterred, he's not scared, he is still moving. He is still working, and he's working in small ways, he's working in hidden ways, he's planting seeds and he's watering those seeds. So I want to say that to say, take courage, for I have overcome the world, not me. Jesus has overcome the world. The water, the rain is falling. And it is refreshing. And those seeds are starting to germinate. Guys, the harvest is ready. There are people in our world. There are people in our families, our friends, the people we work with that have been so lost in the darkness that they have sprouted and they have grown and they are ready for the harvest. They are ready to hear the truth. They are ready for a work that God's going to do in their hearts. I love the Samaritan woman because she goes back and she tells the people, guys, I think I found the Christ. I think I found the one we've been looking for. So the Samaritans weren't just sitting in their sort of Judaism and like just kind of like they were looking, they were waiting for the Messiah. They were ready for him to come. We live in a world where people don't even realize how much their souls are longing for the truth. Their souls are longing for Jesus Christ. And we have that. We can give that. But as Jesus says in Matthew, that the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Guys, we are the workers. It's not an easy job. It's not supposed to be an easy job. Farming is hard. God calls us to a difficult task. I remember the first big youth retreat that I took my youth group to. So we didn't put this on. It was another church that did it, and there was probably like 15, 20 churches, several hundred kids there. And the first night, we had a meeting of all the youth pastors and youth leaders. And the director of this retreat, he looked at us, and I'm on the job. I'm a youth pastor for like 2 months, so just totally green, totally fresh. And he says, guys, sometimes it feels like you have an impossible task. You've got teenagers that are in the world, they want the world, and you're supposed to sell them on Jesus, and it seems impossible. And I'm sitting there thinking like, okay, he's gonna pep talk us. He's gonna give me something really good. He said, you're right. It is impossible. So stop trying to make it happen. You can't do it. You cannot do it. Only God can do it. And it was the most encouraging thing, like to realize that I cannot do this, we cannot do this without God. That takes a lot of the burden off of us. You know, if you're ever talking to someone and you're like, oh man, I need to convince them that God is real. I need to convince them of Jesus. Don't. Only, like we hear, oh, I saved this person. I led this person to Christ. Like preachers will do that. They'll boast about all the salvations that they've won. That's not how it works. Humans do not do that. That is the Holy Spirit speaking to people. Our job is to just, going back to a few weeks ago, to be the light that shines on the hope of the world. All right? This is what Jesus says. He says, I sent you to reap what you have not worked for. Others have done the hard work. You have reaped the benefits of their labor. The world out there, the soil has been worked, the seeds have been planted, and the water has fallen, and it's our job to go out and reap the harvest. To go out and just be present, to be the light in people's lives. To show them, you don't have to tell them who Jesus is, show them who Jesus is. Live your life in such a way that they can't help but see something different about it. And I'm telling you from experience, people see something different about you, they will ask. They will talk to you. Especially if they know you're a Christian. Because they'll see, you're different from most Christians. Has anyone ever said that to you? You're different. You're not like other Christians. Hey, that's the biggest compliment you can give me. Because that means I'm being Jesus. I don't want to be like other Christians. I want to be like Christ. So we go out and we live a life that shows people who Christ is. We shine light into that darkness. The darkness can't comprehend the light. Can't understand it. People need Jesus. We have Jesus. Everything that we do needs to be part of the harvest. So my prayer for us as a church, as we step into a new season and exploring the things that God has for us on this property, the hopefully future actual physical harvests that we bring, the communities that we build, the things that we're a part of. My prayer is that everything we do would be to bring God glory. Yes, I want us to have a religion that is pure and faultless, that cares for the widow and the orphan and poor people. Like, we need to be that. But that just needs to be the action behind our motivation of wanting to bring glory to Jesus Christ. That's what needs to be behind it all. And to be ready, because the harvest is ripe. We have the tools in our hands. We need to go out into the fields. We need to get to work.